Hi everyone. I just came across this interesting explainer and I thought I would share it with you. It's about US atrocity determinations, as you could see on the screen. And so it's sort of an explainer of what they are, what the rationale of atrocity determinations is. And it's written by Nicole Widashim. If I'm not, maybe I'm butchering her name, but it's very, very unlikely that she's going to listen to this. So I should get away with that. And she's staff at I think at the Human Rights Watch. Well, actually, we could do could check her out. I think so. So Nicole is a senior human rights advisor. Nicole Widashim is the deputy Washington director at Human Rights Watch. Yeah, I was right. I was right. All right. So she's just staff at Human Rights Watch, but also it looks like an advisor of USAID. So I think very important voice. And here she talks about what the essence of U.S. atrocity determinations is in relation, generally what they are. And she speaks about how they have been historically used. She talks in considerable detail about atrocity determinations in the case of Ethiopia in relation to Ethiopia's and Eritrea's war on Tigray. That's not how she frames it. Of course, she used politically correct language. So she starts by describing some contradictory statements that the US government has issued in relation to Tigray. The first one, if you remember, about official acknowledgement that the Ethiopian regime and the Amhara forces have committed ethnic cleansing in Western Tigray. So I think that was a statement issued by Antony Blinken. What is the position of Antony Blinken? I think foreign minister. I think they use a different designation in the US. I think is what would it? I think Secretary of State, if I'm not mistaken. I'm sorry, I started recording without doing some basic research, but I think you know who Antony Blinken is, and actually now I'm sure he's Secretary of State. So about a year ago, he officially said that Amhara forces, I don't remember the exact wording he used, but I think Amhara forces in collaboration with Ethiopian forces and probably Eritrean forces had committed ethnic cleansing in Western Tigray. And a couple of months later, the US made another official acknowledgement that Ethiopia was committing very, very serious crimes. And when they say serious crimes, generally they mean either war crime or crimes against humanity and other serious violations of human rights. So that was one official statement from the US government. But out of nowhere, a couple of months ago, I think it would have been about 2 months ago or 1 month ago, the same US government said that Ethiopia wasn't committing any serious human rights violations. And of course, that is some sort of groundwork for lifting the sanctions that have been imposed on Ethiopia. So two very, very contradictory statements from the US government. One, an official acknowledgement or an atrocity determination, you could say. I'm going to come back later to what exactly atrocity determinations are. And then something that would seem to repudiate the initial acknowledgement, which is that the US government said Ethiopia wasn't engaged in any human rights violations, and therefore Congress could start the process of lifting restrictions on Ethiopia. So that is I think maybe the first two paragraphs of Nicole with shame, not on a first name basis, is essay talks about, and she speaks about how atrocity determinations have generally been made historically. She mentions the case of Bosnia and Herzegovina. I don't quite remember exactly how the situation was then, and then Rwanda, and then Iraq, some of you might say, and then Darfur, Sudan, and then Myanmar and China, and now Ethiopia. And she defines what atrocity determination is. Atrocity determination is officially acknowledging a crime that either a state or non-state actor has committed. So it's sort of an official recognition of a crime that has been committed. That is exactly what atrocity determinations are. And she said that generally they serve two purposes, at least as far as the US government is concerned. The US government uses atrocity determinations to achieve two purposes. One, she says, to galvanize US support. So if the US wants us to galvanize other countries into supporting a certain cause related to what other country is doing in terms of crimes, the US issues or makes atrocity determination, and that sort of helps it galvanize other countries to make the same sort of determination and to advocate for whatever end it is that the US is after. And the second purpose is just to put crimes committed by state or non-state actor on. I'm not sure about non-state actor. Actually, she doesn't say that here. It's my sort of instinctive feeling. So maybe non-state actor might not be within the realm of atrocity determination. I don't know. Maybe you'll have to check that out. So I'm sorry for saying something without first checking that it's the case. But anyway, the second purpose is to just put on record, on permanent record, something that a country has committed. So these are sort of the broad outlines of what atrocity determinations are and how they have been historically used by the US government, and in which countries atrocity determinations have been made. And in the case of Ethiopia, she seeks to explain why the US government might have been forced into making two contradictory statements. She says that the reason why the US government is now trying to pretend that the Ethiopian government hasn't committed anything, although the US government doesn't quite put it like that. What they are saying is that the country is not committing any crimes anymore. But that is what they officially say. They don't. You would never hear any US government official say now that Ethiopia has committed ethnic cleansing or any serious human rights violations. There's generally a consensus among the US government officials that Ethiopia hasn't committed any serious crimes, and there's some sort of incentive to want to move on to pretend that Ethiopia is sort of a clean country. And so Nicole, Nicole with a shame says that the reason for that, again, is her personal opinion. But she says that the reason might be because the US thinks that the priority in Ethiopia now should be to secure the fragile peace. And the way to do that is by sort of buying into the Ethiopian government narrative. And the Ethiopian government narrative now, or the Ethiopian regime's narrative now, is that it has its own internal justice and accountability mechanism, and whatever crimes might have been committed by whichever party, they would be dealt with internally. And of course, the Ethiopian regime obviously doesn't want to admit that it has committed any serious crimes, ethnic cleansing or otherwise. And the US might have calculated that the way to make amends with the Ethiopian regime is to happily parrot the regime's narrative. And part of the reason, she says, might be because, well, number one, the US has some sort of economic interest in Ethiopia, but also because Ethiopia is, well, actually, even before the war, it was one of the anchor states. So an anchor state is a sort of a country that the US used to stabilize the region. So in East Africa, for instance, Ethiopia is considered as an influential player, and the US wants to do business with Ethiopia. And so because there is that incentive on the part of the US, the US government wants to pretend that nothing has happened and just accept whatever it is that the Ethiopian government wants to project. But she said that would be a wrong policy. She said that if the Ethiopian government is to be expected as a stabilizer in East Africa, as an anchor state, it must first demonstrate, so this is Nicola's reasoning, it must first demonstrate that it is capable of holding its own perpetrators of crime, so holding perpetrators within Ethiopia to account. And she said that a country incapable of doing that can't be expected to be a stabilizer of other countries, and the whole notion of anchor state would just fall apart if you are doing business with a country incapable of holding its own citizens to account. So for that, and of course, it would also be a miscarriage of justice to victims in Tigray. So for two reasons, she says, the U.S. government would be mistaken if it's thinking that it could make Ethiopia an anchor state or an influential state in the Horn of Africa without making sure that it is capable of holding itself to account. And she advises the US government to do three things now. One, or two of the recommendations she makes are actually very, very vague. She said that the US should support justice and accountability. Maybe I should scroll down so that you could see. She says somewhere here that the US should support justice and accountability process, but she doesn't say which one. Because there is one sham process within Ethiopia, the internal mechanism that Ethiopia has been promoting, which is something that everybody knows is a lie, is a charade, is something that the Ethiopian regime came up with to cover up its atrocity while at the same time placating its Western donors. But anyway, she said that the US should support justice and accountability in Ethiopia, and she said that the US should support the extension of the UN body, so that is the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia. That's a very, very good point, because as I think every one of you will know that the mandate of the UN Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia will end, as things stand, will end in September. But of course, the commission members have been making noise that they haven't had enough time to investigate anything, partly because they haven't had access to Tigray and they haven't had enough time. So surely there is no way that they would have done a thorough and meticulous investigation. So obviously, they would want their mandate to be extended. But the Ethiopian regime has been lobbying African and actually some Western countries, European countries actually, to help it end the mandate of the commission. And I think the fear now is that the mandate is likely to end in September. But Nicole here said that the US should galvanize support. It should use every leverage that the US government has to make sure that the mandate is extended, because it's very, very important that the investigation is done, because at the very least, we well, at least the US and the Western world, with their modicum of respect for human rights, have a responsibility to the Tigray people, to other victims, to at the very least make sure that their story, their suffering is recorded and not brushed aside for some political expediency. That's not quite how she puts it. I'm a little bit elaborating, using my own words, but that is the gist of what she says. The second reason, and the third thing Nicole says the U.S. government should now do is aid should be guided by the atrocity determination. So U.S. aid is one of the biggest aid donors to Ethiopia, although it has suspended operations for the past couple of weeks because of the massive aid diversion in Ethiopia. But she said that aid provision in Ethiopia should be dictated by the atrocity determination. So it's not quite clear to me what exactly she's getting up to here, because she can't be saying the aid should be conditioned on the Ethiopian regime doing one thing or another, because I don't think that is how aid should work. Because that would then mean that the provision of aid to innocent civilians would be conditioned on what politicians do or don't do, and that seems to me to be very, very unfair, if not unlawful. So I don't think that's what she's saying, but she said that maybe I should read exactly what she's saying here for you to have a think about what exactly. So, all right. So she says all assistance to people inside Ethiopia should be guided by the atrocity determination. That means development and aid programs from the U.S. Agency for International Development, so that is USAID, should address the root causes of the killing and the atrocity risks, as well as reform of the weak justice sector. Resources should be directed to what survivors need and want, including access to trauma counseling, psychosocial support, reparations for loss of property and wealth, and training on how to pursue justice in their own domestic context. Now, of course, this is very naive to expect that Ethiopia would be able to dispense some sort of domestic context. It's just naive at best and an insult to victims at worst. But that notwithstanding, I think she's saying that the US should use the leverage it has in terms of aid to force the Ethiopian regime to implement some sort of reform. But I don't quite know exactly how this is supposed to work. But anyway, she gives three recommendations to both the international community and to the Ethiopian regime, and to reiterate, because they are very important, support justice and accountability. So this is a message directed to the US. Support the extension of the mandate of the UN body, of the International Commission of Human Rights Experts on Ethiopia, and make sure that aid is guided by atrocity determinations. So that was that. The essay is on justsecurity.org. I don't think I had ever read an essay or anything on justsecurity.org before, but it looks like it's influential website, and so yeah, thank you for your time. That was that from me. I thought that this was worth sharing it with you, and I hope you find it useful as well. As always, when I come across content that I think is useful, my message to you, my listeners, is to share it among your friends, whether on your social media accounts or any other mechanism, but to make sure that it reaches to as many people as possible. And that is exactly what I would say today as well. And until I see you next time, bye-bye.